The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. And I'm so pleased to have Peter Mathews on my show. You know, I'll tell you a little bit about him. The People's Democrat, they call him, leading the fight to make America work for all. Peter Mathews refuses money from corporate PACs and lobbyists. People powered, not corporate bought. That's his motto. And I want to welcome to the Susan Brender Show, Peter Mathews. Now, we have another guest who's been a guest on our show so many times. He has always something to say. He writes books. He's a pundit. He's been on all TV shows, and he's an amazing man. I'm so pleased to have Michael Solomon on the show with Peter Mathews. So let me ask you guys, you know, one of the things that Michael wanted to know is, Peter, do you believe in economic equality?
Absolutely, I do, because without economic equality, you cannot have democracy. You can't even have equal opportunity. So, in other words, there's no freedom without opportunity. And economic opportunity, economic equality is extremely the baseline. Without that, we cannot live a good human life. So I do believe in that.
What about you, Michael? You say that you're open to a lot of different things. And I don't know whether you want me to say this, but I will say that you're a conservative. Now, how do you believe in economic equality, or why do you believe in equal economy if you do?
Well, two things, Susan. One, I am a social libertarian, but I am a fiscal conservative. Let's get that record straight. Equality doesn't work. If everybody in this country was equal today, if everybody got paid the same salary from the president on down to the person who's sweeping the factory floor, and we all got paid on Friday afternoon the same amount of money, right to the penny, by Monday morning we're not equal anymore, and I'll tell you why. Because the average factory worker or the blue collar worker may take his money, go out and buy his son a BMX bicycle from a big box store, or a $200 pair of sneakers, buy a half a dozen lottery tickets and a case of beer. And by Monday morning, he's calling me up and saying, we're not equal anymore. This is not fair, because I'm the guy that's going to take my money, pay my bills, maybe take my kids to the movies and dinner. And whatever I have left, I'm going to invest and save over the weekend. So Monday morning, I'm going to have bucks left. And the guy who, pardon the pun, but pissed away his money over the weekend is going to have nothing. He's going to call me up and saying, hey, we're not equal. It's not fair. This is a free country. America has been built on freedom. And we have a right to do what we want with our money, with our freedom, and with our, within the law. And I hate to say it, but that's exactly what it is. So
now, Peter, hold on, Michael, just a minute. Let's hear what Peter has to say about what you just said.
Certainly, no one's talking about exact equality, the exact same pay. That would be ridiculous. There's no society in the world that has that. We're talking about income ratios. We're talking about a semblance, meaning equity, not equality, but equity, meaning a fair distribution of income and wealth, so that no one person has the ability to be, like in the feudal days, become a king or an emperor or a prince, while everyone else are peasants. We need ratios of income. For example, in the United States, when President Reagan came into office, it was 40-1. The highest paid people were CEOs, and the average worker was 40-1 the income of the CEO of the average worker when President Reagan came in 1980. Now, when he left, when we look at what's going on today, it's 360-1, like this. It's grown this much, and that is not opportunity. We have to have equal opportunity, so every single individual can pursue their happiness, pursue the hard work. Yes, I believe in hard work. I believe in entrepreneurship. I believe in profit making, but there has to be some semblance of fairness. Otherwise, you can have a two-class society, like rich and poor, like back in the feudal era, and no one can climb the ladder.
Well,
let me ask you a question, Peter. Who creates the jobs in this country? The super wealthy or the poor?
The workers create it. The workers are the one. Without workers, you can't have jobs, because the owners cannot make any profits. They both do. You have to give credit both. Let me quote President Lincoln. Lincoln said, labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital would not have existed unless labor had first existed. And therefore, in the scheme of things, we should give labor the higher consideration. I'm willing to give equal consideration. I believe entrepreneurs should be credited for creating and coming up with new ideas, but workers also innovate and they help the entrepreneur make more profit and better products over time.
Name one law in this country that's holding somebody back from becoming an entrepreneur and becoming a multimillionaire.
It's called
We'll give somebody
tuitions. Yeah, I'll give you an example. Students that cannot go to school because the tuitions have skyrocketed by several hundred% in the last few years. In California, we had tuition-free education, and that's when the tech boom occurred a few years later, because then the children of poor people, working poor, could go to the University of California at Berkeley and become lawyers and doctors and engineers and make some money and create new software. But you're eliminating half the population or more from opportunity when you put them in student debt because you've raised the tuition so high. You know, my friend went to UCLA Medical School and paid $225 a quarter. He became a successful doctor, no debt. He's retired now on the hills of La Jolla. Governor Pete Wilson paid $37 a semester to go to UC Berkeley Law School. He became a businessman, a mayor, an entrepreneur, and a senator. And a governor. That's American success story, because opportunity was provided so people can take the ball and run with it.
You know, you just made my point. But here's the problem we have in this country. How come the government will try to regulate every single industry out there, but they don't regulate academia? They will let colleges charge whatever they want.
Because the government funds the colleges and they cut funds back to give corporate loopholes to their friends.
Good.
But this is dollar democracy on steroids. I'm with you, Michael. As libertarian, we share a lot of things.
Okay, let me give you a couple of numbers.
Corporate welfare, corporate loopholes allow them to get benefits for paying for campaigns, and then the government does what the corporate elites want them to do, like cut back on tuition subsidies and make the students pay for it instead of the biggest, wealthiest people in America could afford to pay for it, who got their education free, by the way.
Okay,
the same CEOs got their education free back in the 60s in California.
Let me ask you this question, Peter.
Sure.
Not hypothetically, actually. Okay, if you win your seat and you take over in the 40th district, okay, well,
it's 42nd district. California.
I'm sorry. Anyway, let me explain this. Columbia University in New York has a $37 billion endowment. Yale has about a $25 billion endowment. The interest alone that Columbia collects on that endowment for 1 year is enough to pay the tuition for every single student for the next 40 years. Yet Columbia University doesn't use that money for anything else but special funding for all kinds of garbage out there, every kind of study they want to do. They don't use a dime of it to take care of their students or their students' housing at all. But yet they still take government money. Why? Will you stop that if you're elected? Will you try to stop it? I know you can't. You need 450 other votes, but
right. No, you've got a great point, Michael. You're absolutely right. When these endowments are bringing in so much money in interest rates and they're making all kinds of profit, they should use some of that money to put back into students who need it through scholarships or what have you, rather than just going out and spending it unwisely. So I'm with you all the way in terms of fairness and equity and real common sense spending.
Gentlemen, let me stop you here. We're going to move on because there's never going to be a consensus of opinion. But
no, well, I think, Susan, let me just say one more thing to Peter, because I think it's extremely important. Okay. The government now wants to tax wealth in this country, except academia is exempt from that. So they may take 50% of what I earn, or not what I earn, but what I've accumulated over the years, but they're not going to touch academia. Why don't they take $15 billion from Columbia or $12 billion from Yale and the other schools that have Princeton or the other schools that have a tremendous endowment? No, they're not talking about that. They're only going to do it because there's 1/10 of 1% of the millionaires in this country have X number of dollars, and they're going to try to tax that wealth. We don't have a wealth tax in this country.
Can I address that?
An income tax.
May I address that real quickly? First of all, the proposal that I support is tax wealth of billionaires, not millionaires, not multimillionaires, billionaires who are like the economic royalists, like you have princes and kings. They can afford to pay some of that wealth they've accumulated, so that other people can have opportunity. The second thing is that Columbia, you keep bringing these private universities that are the elite of the elite who have all kinds of money. What about the public universities? UC Berkeley, one of the top schools in the country and the world academically, but it needs funding. And that's where the government is cut back. And I'm all for equity. And I believe libertarians are on the right track when they talk about real competition.
I'm going to stop you here again and we're going to move on. But I have a question for both of you. Elon Musk yesterday made a speech and he's a multi-billionaire who doesn't need money, believe me or not. The fact of the matter is that he bought Twitter. Okay. And now what he's saying is that he's going to allow people to speak up, to say what's on their mind, to really give the information that is really very important, that's been absolutely taken away because of things like, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. Now, what's your thoughts about that, Peter? You have a guy like Elon Musk making freedom or creating freedom of speech. So do you believe in freedom of speech for everybody?
I certainly do. I believe in freedom of speech for everybody, not just for millionaires or billionaires. And it's a good thing. I got a Tesla. I bought two of them, actually, one after the other product. But Elon Musk is like other billionaires. If they can control the media universe, they're going to control who can speak. He may change his mind tomorrow and decide that he won't give freedom of speech to progressives or liberals or socialists, but he'll give them to libertarians. And that's not right to do that. I mean, you can have private enterprise, but there's got to be some regulation on the public sector media, especially when it's private media, and the people own the airwaves. Now we're talking about something different with Twitter. It's a different thing, but the same principle. We want to make sure that billionaires don't control our discourse. That's really important for democracy.
And what's your thoughts about that, Michael?
Well, my thoughts are very simple. That I don't like anybody controlling my First Amendment rights, whether it's liberals, conservatives, or anybody else. I have a right to say anything I want as long as I don't yell fire in the theater. But they've gotten away with that for years, yelling fire in the theater, and people allow them. Perfect example. If you go back a few years ago, when they allowed the KKK to march in Skokie, Illinois, Skokie, Ohio, was that not yelling fire in the theater? They knew why they were there. They were only there to incite everybody. And the police were there not to protect the citizens, but to protect the marchers, to protect their First Amendment rights. But that's yelling fire in the theater. They're causing havoc and causing problems. That to me is crazy. I mean, so if you want to bring the First Amendment back, bring it back equally, but keep the fire out of the theater. And that's important.
Yeah,
and I totally agree with Michael that they should never let those people march through Skokie, because it is fire in the theater. It's provocative, insightful, it's hateful. We don't need that kind of speech that will cause clear and present danger. That's the whole thing. I'm with him on that one.
Now, Peter, there's another thing that has been happening. Our president, Biden, has talked about the Second Amendment, and he wants to get rid of it. How do you feel about that?
There's no need to get rid of it. We need to regulate gun ownership. Get rid of the ridiculous semi-automatic assault rifles. Don't let anyone own a nuclear weapon, please, because the right to bear arms is not unlimited. Nuclear weapons are not allowed. Okay, so that we can regulate and make sure that we register, even handguns should be registered and licensed, and people should have training to be able to use them, because it is attached to a well-regulated militia being necessary for its free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There's no positive, the phrase at the beginning that talks about regulation. Anyone, except for maybe Justice, what's his name? The one who ruled that anyone can own guns privately with no regulation, basically, Scalia. Even he agreed that machine guns can be regulated and prevented from people from owning it. So I do believe that we don't need to get rid of the Second Amendment. We need to apply gun regulation and gun control more sensibly. It's about time that the shootings are.
Do you agree with him, Michael?
He's not making a point, because here's why. Gun regulation is regulated. Gun ownership is regulated in the United States. Everybody who wants to purchase a gun today has to go through a credit. Let me give you an example, Peter. When I left the police department in 1981, when I retired from the police department in 1981, I carried a gun every day on duty and off duty for 15 years. Never had a problem. When I retired, I had to turn in my guns. And now I was a citizen. I wasn't a police officer any longer. I had to apply for a New York State gun license. I had to be fingerprinted. I had to go through a records check, even though I was an exemplary police officer for 15 years. And it took me about 4 months before I was licensed again and was able to get my guns back. So I know what it's like to be regulated. The other thing, too, is everybody's screaming against the NRA and the NRA. Are you familiar with the AAA, the Automobile Club of America? They regulate vehicle safety and they train drivers and they talk about vehicle safety. The NRA only talks about gun safety. That's what they do. The problem with the NRA is not a single gun shooting in the United States, whether it was terrorism or otherwise, whether it was in Stoneman Douglas High School here in Florida, or it was anywhere else in the tower shooting in Texas years ago, not a single shooter in this country was ever a member of the NRA. So telling me that the NRA is promoting gun violence is a lot of bunk. And that's what the left has been doing all these years. They're trying to shut down the NRA, and it's not true. They are for gun safety. They have classes for safety, and that's what they do. And as far as assault rifles,
you missed something here. Go ahead. You want to go ahead. You want to?
As far as assault rifles, anyway, the so-called AR-15 gun that everybody says is an automatic weapon is not an automatic weapon.
Semi-automatic.
Excuse me.
It's semi-automatic, right?
So is a handgun. A handgun is semi-automatic. You pull it, keep pulling the trigger, and it goes off. That's a semi-automatic. There is nothing more than that.
Okay, but let me get back to what you said regarding. If you don't mind,
sure,
the gun show, you're saying that you're highly regulated as an ex-police officer and you have to get licensed. I agree with that. That's important. But if people go to a gun show, they can buy a gun without any kind of ID or background check and immediately.
Wrong.
It's completely, as you know, they can just go out and buy it.
That's the media. That's the media's rhetoric.
But that's not true, Michael. That's not true.
No, it's not true. You go to a gun show. The only way you can buy a gun is you have to have a license. You cannot buy a gun at a gun show. They will put it on hold for you. You will get your check. You will go through your background check, and then you will come back and you'll pick up your gun. You
I'll check that out.
You cannot buy as any Joe Blow citizen. You cannot walk into a gun show and buy a gun and walk out with it. It is not possible. Not in Florida, not any state that I know of. Maybe in
Peter,
Chicago.
let me ask you something. Just a second, Michael. Peter, isn't California one of the states that has the most regulations of guns?
It is, yes.
And what
we had a shooting in Sacramento yesterday or the day before. Yeah, that's what's the same thing. Chicago, isn't Chicago highly regulated? Yes. But this is a nation that people can travel freely. There's no checks at the borders of the states at all about what kind of weapon you're carrying. And that's what happens. A lot of this stuff is going across border, like in Chicago. They're coming from other states where they can get it immediately and shoot up people. So I'm just saying, let's be sensible about it. What's so wrong with requiring more training, Michael, and more licensing and a record of who's got these guns? What's wrong? Are you worried about something?
There's still more training. There's plenty of training out there. The NRA is probably one of the greatest organizations that promotes gun safety than anyone else in this country. But yet they're blaming the NRA for all these shootings. When that shooting happened in Las Vegas last year, when 53 people were killed, they're blaming the NRA. This guy wasn't a member of the NRA. He had nothing to do with the NRA.
Okay, I don't see it that way fully.
I mean, why don't we?
Yeah, it's the gun manufacturers that I would blame more. It's the manufacturers that are pushing these things on people. The NRA gets money from them as well, as you know, as an interest group from the manufacturers. And the manufacturers aren't content with selling guns in the United States. They want to sell them around the world, the manufacturers. That's how they're going to make money, right? If enough people buy guns in the United States, then the market dries up. So you're going to have to promote it somewhere and somehow or the other, right? And create more fear among people. Look at the countries that have stricter gun regulation and gun control. There's far less violence or murder or killing, unwanted killing. And you know that's a fact. In Britain, in Germany, in France, you know that's a fact. And they can still go hunting over there. They can still have guns, but it's highly regulated.
It's highly regulated here too. How come Chicago, who's got the toughest gun laws in the United States, the toughest, have the most shootings every weekend?
Because I just said people come from outside. The other states don't have the tough gun laws. They bring the guns.
The people who are doing the shooting are living in Chicago. They're on the south side of Chicago, and those are the ones who are doing the shooting.
And they may have gotten their guns from friends that brought them in from the other parts of the country or next door.
But they're buying illegal guns. If we regulate guns and don't allow the average honest hunters and people who go target shooting and use it as a hobby and not a sport, if we allow that, the only people that are going to have guns are going to be the bad guys.
Let me make something clear. I'm not advocating banning guns for everyone or banning guns for legitimate hunters or target practice folks. I was doing my friends in when I was a kid in Maryland. Our neighbors in Pennsylvania were hunters, and they even had us shoot. I was like 11-year-old kid, and they had me shoot not just a BB gun but a couple other rifles with supervision. And I'm fine with hunting or with target practice, but I'm talking about these guns that can be manufactured in the house I'm talking about Saturday night specials. These things are dangerous things, and they're the ones that used to kill. By the way, most people in America that die from gun violence are not from those mass shootings. It's from people that know them, that are relatives or friends in the house where they live, because of some emotional spat that they have, and people go haywire and use the gun that's there. And sometimes kids shoot their parents accidentally. That's the most of the deaths that are occurring, and suicides are a large number, but the majority are the deaths that are occurring from people in a moment of emotion. They get crazy with the gun that's in the house, and something happens.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to move on again. And this time I'm going to talk a little bit about climate change, because climate change is one of the biggest issues that we have right now. And people are so concerned about the way our government is taking care of the society with regard to climate change. So have you looked at the empirical data, not the science that the proponents expound, Peter?
The data that I have is all from scientific sources and from going down and talking to people where the sea levels have been rising. Imperial Beach in California, where there are 3 king tides a year now since climate went up, the global warming went up. And I'm looking at all the data from there, from the United Nations IPCC panel and the United States government itself. Those are the data I'm looking for, universities. So I'm not familiar with exactly what you're talking about. I'd be happy to look at any kind of data. I'd love to examine it.
Okay. What about you, Michael? How do you feel about what's going on with regard to this climate change issue?
Well, I'm going to have to make a statement. If you may not like it, Peter, but I've got the empirical science to back it up, and I'll give you the science. And when we finish this interview, if you go back to listen to the interview, I think Deborah is going to be putting up some photographs and some NASA satellite photos that I have. I lecture on climate change all over the country and all over the world. The last one I gave was on a cruise ship in Shanghai. But let me tell you a little bit about the king tides in California and Florida. And here's where they come from. The only thing that controls the tides is Pluto and our moon. Our moon is 37,000 miles closer to the Earth over the last 3 years than it's been in 75 years. 75 years ago, we also had king tides. They're showing you the high tides, which are flooding the streets. I agree, that's right. But it has nothing to do with the ice warming. And the reason it doesn't have anything to do with the ice warming is because there was a man a couple of hundred years ago by the name of Archimedes who discovered buoyancy. If all the sea ice in the world, all the earth, the floating ice, all the icebergs and all the sea ice melted tonight, we would not lose a half inch of beach anywhere in the world. That's a scientific fact. The only science that's out there that's being published every day is something called consensus science. Al Gore got his theory on global climate change after he read Michael Crichton's book, State of Fear. Al Gore said, if you don't believe in global climate change, read Crichton's book. Crichton called up Gore and said, stop quoting my book, it's fiction. Gore said to him, because I heard the interview, Gore said to him, but you have footnotes in your book. He says, those footnotes are phony. It's to make the book look real. It's fiction. There is no such thing as consensus science. Now, when I was a detective, and Peter, and you may not know this, but you could look it up. When I was a detective, we started every investigation. I was in the Organized Crime Control Bureau. We started every investigation by following the money. According to a company known as Generation Investment Management, it earns $218 million a year on average, brokering carbon credits and other green energy. Forbes magazine and the Wall Street Journal said the principals in this country are going to be the first billionaires to ever make money from selling something you can't touch, smell, or taste. You know who the principals are? Al Gore is the CEO, and David Blood, who's the former asset manager for Goldman Sachs, is his assistant. Where is that company located? It's located in the UK so they can beat our US taxes. That's where we followed the money to. Al Gore has earned close to $1 billion since the Kyoto Protocol. And that's a fact. You can look that up.
And I'll give you some facts from the U.S. government's fourth National Climate Assessment, the 2018 report on climate change. The U.S. government's fourth National Climate Assessment report, released in November 2018, warns of a damaged environment and shrinking U.S. economy. The 1,656-page assessment, in quote, describes the effects of climate change on the economy, health, and environment, including record wildfires in California, crop failures in the Midwest, and crumbling infrastructure in the South. It says that American exports and supply chains could be disrupted, agricultural yields could fall to 1980 levels by the mid-century, and fire seasons could spread to the Southeast. We're seeing this stuff happening in front of our eyes. We don't, we don't need to attack Al Gore or some individual. I'm not going to defend
I'm not attacking Al Gore.
I know, but I'm not trying to defend Al Gore. I'm just saying that has nothing to do with the scientific research. I'm showing two charts here from NASA that it's in my book, by the way, my book, Dollar Democracy on Steroids, with Liberty and Justice for Some, How to Reclaim the American Dream for All. This book has two charts here, one out on top of the other from NASA, both are from NASA. It shows a sudden and severe increase in carbon dioxide emissions coinciding with global land ocean temperature index, which is also going up at the same time. They're going parallel to each other. I mean, you may say, well, that's coincidence. Well, I say, why don't we just start shifting to renewable energy and get off the fossil fuels and see if it was coincidence or not?
Of course we can't, and let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. Have you read the Paris Climate Accord?
Yes.
You read it? Do you know it has
well, look, I'm not going to memorize it, okay, Michael?
No, I'm not asking you to memorize it.
Investigate me to see if I've memorized it. I've looked at it, yes. I've looked at the summaries of it, yes. Go ahead.
Okay, the basis of the Paris Climate Accord has nothing to do with climate change. It has to do with clean air and clean energy. The United States, as of 2 years ago, has already surpassed the requirements of the Paris Climate Accord. The three dirtiest countries in the world are exempt from that accord till 2035. That's China, India, and Russia. They are the three biggest polluters in the world. The United States has already surpassed it. So why should we have to spend $1 trillion a year to get to give it to other countries so they can get their act together? Let them get their own act together. It's no different than NATO, when all these countries weren't paying their fair share and we were picking up the ball for them. It doesn't work.
I understand, Powell. But here's your answer. The answer is because we all live together on the planet. If India, China, and Russia don't get their stuff together and we don't help them get it together, help the third world countries, we're going to suffer just as much. And frankly, something else, Michael, you overlooked. The United States has been the biggest carbon emitter since the industrial era because we're the biggest economy in history and we started earlier than India or China or Russia. Think about that in industrialization. So we've put more greenhouse gases, the United States has, and we didn't know much about this till later. So I'm not going to blame people who were not familiar with what's really going on, but still take some responsibility. That the United States actually, even if we're producing less right now than China, we put far more into the atmosphere than China ever did because we started much earlier, right? So how about we get this together as citizens of this country who care about the world, who know that what happens in the world affects us here, and let's work together on this.
Peter, wait a minute, Michael, just a second. Peter, I have a question for you. You talked about fossil fuels. We have so much oil, we have so much gas, we have so much natural, everything. I mean, we literally have everything, and we can really give the whole world, including India, including all the third world countries, all of this fuel. Now, why aren't we doing that? You mentioned that you think you want to get rid of fossil fuels, but why would you want to do that?
Because I want my 10-year-old daughter to be able to go out and not be drowned, or maybe not even have any shoreline. I live near the beach, and all the structural engineers are telling us we're going to have to raise our house up because of the water coming in because of the sea level rising, which has been documented. We know the sea levels have risen in the last 30 years. She's only 10 years old. I want her to survive, so I think it's better time that we move directly and quickly, rapidly, as Germany is doing. And so is China now. They're leapfrogging ahead of us with the cutting edge technology in solar panels and electric cars. In China, do you know that if you want to buy an electric car, the average electric car is $19,000 for the average Chinese family. The government pays for 11,000 of it. The family pays 8,000 for the car. That's called a subsidy for the common good. And more people can buy that. The Chinese built a 30,000-mile railway system that's all electric, non-polluting, and did it in 7 years. We've been fooling around in California for how many decades trying to build a high-speed rail here? And Japan has trains that go 350 miles an hour. We can do this, folks. We're the country that put America on the moon. We're the ones that we're the first in so many things. And yet we're not putting our heads together right now to say, it's time that we committed ourselves to saving our country and saving the world at the same time.
Michael, you must have well, let's put it to you this way. How do you feel also about the fact that we're not using our fossil fuels right here in the States, and it's affecting our economy? I mean, big time.
We just passed one of the biggest infrastructure bills in America ever, and we will not be able to rebuild our infrastructure because we don't have our own oil. Do you know that it takes about 95% of crude oil to make asphalt and to help build steel and to run steel mills to get to produce steel for bridges and roads and everything else. So without fossil fuels, we're not going to have any asphalt or anything to build infrastructure. The other thing you talked about before about California with the forest fires and everything else, here's the facts, Peter. The governors of California over the last 3 administrations will not allow them to clean up the environment. You know why there's so many forest fires? Because of all the dead leaves and dead trees and everything else in California that are there. The other reason is why the forest fires. Why do you think that 80,000 trees, almond trees, went out, were dead and had to be bulldozed out because they didn't have enough water for irrigation? Because the last 2 governors refused to approve a bill to build a reservoir that would hold 13 billion gallons of water that they could use for irrigation, because there's a stinking little fish that's a ½ inch long that they can't even find that they think is in the water. Okay, but meanwhile, they've taken all the runoff from the spring thaw, from the mountains in California, from the snow, and they pipe it out to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And the reason the oceans are rising so forth is only during high tides because of the moon and Jupiter. But if you could come down to Miami, and I'll show you how it is at low tide, because the tides are 75 feet further out. You have to walk out 75 feet more to get to the water because the tides are low. But they only show you the high tides. They don't show you the low tides.
All right, gentlemen.
The average. We're talking about average sea level rising. No, we're talking about in and out. We're talking about average over the years.
Well, let me tell you. You want to talk about average? Noah just put out. Have you been on an Alaskan cruise, Peter? Have you been up that way?
Not an Alaska one, no. I went down to Mexico once on the cruise.
Let me tell you what's happening in Alaska right now. The largest. This is a fact, and matter of fact, I'm putting the photos up on the site. The largest glacier in North America is the Hubbard Glacier. Cruise ships that used to go to the Hubbard Glacier now in Alaska have to go 60 kilometers out of their way because the entire Hubbard Glacier has grown 14 miles since 2013. That's the last 9 years. It's grown 14 miles. It is blocking the sea lanes. It's going to be blocking the sea lanes completely, that freighters won't be able to get through there. We're going to have to go around the long way to get to bring freight down here. That's exactly what's happening up there. What you're seeing now,
other parts like
Noah has a chart.
Yeah, that should be happening up there, but in Antarctica, you have the ice shelves breaking off because of.
You know why they're breaking, Peter? You know why they're breaking off? Because the ice is getting so thick. It's getting so thick and so heavy that it's breaking off.
Okay. All right.
And Noah has a chart. It'll be up on his site. Noah has a chart showing over the last 30 years the temperature has actually dropped.
In the North Pole, it's gone up. Temperatures have gone up considerably in the North Pole.
No, let me tell you why. You're going to look at the site, and here's what you're going to see. Let me tell you where they're getting the temperatures from. Okay, NOAA put out what they call Stevenson screens. Stevenson screens measure ground-based temperatures. They put one at the University of Arizona in the parking lot where trucks are parking all around it. There's one in UCLA next to an air conditioner blower compressor that's blowing hot air on it. That's the second one. The greatest one of all is the one that the IPCC from the United Nations put up, and it's in Rome at the end of the runway where planes are taking off. I have a photograph of the screen there, sensing the temperature as jet planes are blowing their engines right into it. That's what they're using to determine temperatures. But when you look at the NASA satellite charts of the temperature in the atmosphere, it's actually dropped 1.2 degrees. That is a fact. There have been 2 whistleblowers from NOAA who resigned their position and wrote position papers that none of the mainstream media would ever produce. But they're there. You can read, you can find them.
I'd love to see them. Send them to me. Go to Mathews@msn.com. That would be wonderful, Michael. I'll read them.
I have your website. I'll go there, but I'm going to send you the whole charts. I'm telling you. Peter, this is the truth. I'll send you the photographs of the temperature sensors.
Gentlemen, we're almost at the end of the show, and I would love for Peter to tell everybody a little bit about the book that you're writing and how they can get it, and what you're doing right now. And I want them to also know where you're running for. And if I'm not right, you're running for
the U.S. House of Representatives, with people who refer to as Congress, the lower house, and from the 42nd District of California, which includes Long Beach, Signal Hill, Lakewood, Downey, and then cities that are in the southeast LA, in the county, which is called cities like Huntington Park, and a few other cities. So it's a very diverse district, and there are a lot of low-income people, but also some very high-income people toward the beach. And we want to make sure people have equal opportunity. Some of the kids go to these schools, they have short textbooks that are outdated. They have overcrowded classrooms that they're over 30 per student. I want to help them bring those numbers down, and I want to see more equity in our funding of public schools, because some schools, like the one in my district, near my district, get $7,000 or $8,000 per pupil, whereas in Northern California, a very affluent public school district, $24,000 per pupil. That's just not equal opportunity. Those things are important to me. Climate change is really a big, big issue. And the book I wrote was called, it's been written, it's already been out for a couple of years, Dollar Democracy on Steroids, with Liberty and Justice for Some, How to Reclaim the Middle Class Dream for All. What I'm arguing is that such big money has chased the politicians, and they're taking it. And they've been on the take, not all of them, of course. There are many reformers who don't run with money, corporate money, but they run in like we're doing, with just grassroots support and small donations of individuals. And they end up trying to do the right thing in Congress. But the majority don't want to vote for the legislation that would help us have universal health care. And I support a Medicare for all single-payer healthcare system, like most civilized countries have, where their life expectancy is actually longer than ours. There's less diseases, there's less all kinds of things. We can really work on this. We have the best healthcare technology in the world and some of the best doctors in the world, but we're not putting them to use to make sure everyone is taken care of in health. Education, jobs, I want green jobs that will be 21st century jobs, building new types of technology.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Peter, for really giving so much information and education to our audience, because we need people, even though the two of you have different points of view, it doesn't matter. You're teaching people what you stand for and what is going on now, and that is wonderful. And I want to thank you also, Michael Solomon. Again, tell them what you're writing and also what you're doing.
Well, first I want to wish Peter lots of luck in his election. I know you got a primary coming up, don't you?
I do, a top 2 primary, Michael. And I want to say, Michael, I enjoyed talking with you here and having a little debate. It's wonderful. I do have a primary June 20.
No hard feelings.
No, not at all, Michael.
Listen, we're both looking for the same thing for this country, but
yes,
we're coming from different points of view, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Not at all. I respect you.
And what I want to do is I want to tell you that I do respect you, and I respect everything you said. And I will tell you this, in all honesty, if you got a question on climate change or something, relative to equality and such, count on me. I mean, give me a call. I'll see if I can help you out a little, because I think it's important. I think it's important that you don't use, and I say this very sincerely, that you don't use junk science or consensus science to prove a point, because people will normally see right through that. I mean,
and you should also respect the universities and the public sector that actually doesn't have any axe to grind in their research compared to private sector researchers.
I do, but again, they're all using consensus science, and consensus is not empirical science. Do you know how many? They said that 97% of scientists say that man is responsible for global warming. Do you know how many scientists are in that group? Less than 400. You know how many?
Okay. I have to stop you guys, because right now we're going over the time. But thank you, both of you, Peter Mathews and Michael Solomon, for being on the Susan Brender Show. And I want to thank you so much for being on my show.
You're welcome. The website's petermatthewsforcongress.org. Thank you so much.
Susan, thank you. And they can go to michaelsolomonbooks.com. And my latest book, Mentally Acuity, has just come out last week. And the book before that, One Under the Dibby Tree, which is a novel, believe it or not, just hit number 8 on the bestseller list. So we're looking forward to that going forward.